There is growing pressure for Democrats to enact new voting rights legislation as states begin the once-a-decade process of redistricting, as Republican-controlled states are making moves that would restrict the voting power of their growing minority populations. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today announced the Democrats' plan to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act when they return next week. Of course, the bigger problem still exists that any legislation passed through the House needs 60 votes in the Senate because of the filibuster. There's no indication that that's going to go away anytime soon. Joining me now for what we're calling a strategy session on voting rights, LaTosha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter, Bishop William Barber, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, and Ari Berman, senior reporter for Mother Jones. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate y'all. I just want to go down the list and have you all, I guess, tell me what we're going to do and what you think we can do, given that it's great that we're going to have this pass in the House, but it ain't going nowhere in the Senate. LaTosha, start with you.
I think you hit the nail on the head. The bottom line is right now, as we're looking at the images of Afghanistan, this nation spent over $1 trillion on a war supposedly in the name of democracy. And here it is, we have democracy being attacked right here domestically, and we're going to allow a tool like the filibuster to stand in this space. So I think we have to really deal with the elephant in the room. We're going to have to end the filibuster. Anything that starts and it creates a barrier for democracy, we've got to end it. We also have to organize. We've got to create good trouble. If democracy is going to be so, we're going to have to organize around that. And we need this federal legislation. I think people are going to have to rise up to make sure that it is so.
So, Bishop Barber, it falls to you to explain to me how we get, there are about 9 Republicans, Manchin and Sinema are the people out front, but it's a good 9, 10 of them who also don't want to end the filibuster. We can name a few that we think are on that list. How do you get them to change their mind?
Well, first of all, let me say that my sister LaTosha is exactly right. If we fought a war there, we got to fight here, but fight nonviolently. We have to have mass moral action protests in D.C. and in the states. We got to have mass litigation with our best lawyers. We have to have a massive federal legislation. We got to have both H.R. 1 and H.R. 4, not either or. The one that was written by John Lewis, the For the People's Act, and the one named after him. Then we must have mass political resistance. The CBC and the progressive need to say, not another bill, not another bill. That's how you get those other senators. Nothing is going through. You're not getting any infrastructure, none of it, until you do right by voting rights and federal legislation. And then we need mass public education to make sure people understand it's not just a fight to help black people. That 56 million people use the methodologies to vote that they're trying to undermine in these state legislatures. We need to connect it to voting rights and living wages. Same people that fight against your living wages, the same ones fight against your voting rights. This is an interlocking injustice that we must challenge. And we got to go to the states. Go to D.C., yes, that's why next Thursday, we're headed back to West Virginia from the 26th for a mass motorcade on Manchin. We call everybody to ride on him, nonviolently, of course, but to ride on him, and we need to do that in every one of those Democratic senator states especially, because that's hypocrisy. None of them ran saying that they would be against this. They didn't primary saying that. They only said it after they got the vote, and we can't stand for that or allow that to exist. And anybody that's saying you don't need all of this is not a leader, but a misleader.
Yeah, and Ari, I read, give us the ballot. I know that you can explain to us in pretty simple terms. Let's say we go into the 2022 election with the laws as they are now. What does that wind up looking like?
What it winds up looking like, Joy, is that the federal government did nothing to stop the greatest attack on voting rights since the end of Reconstruction. And history is going to repeat itself. People are going to be disenfranchised. We know that for a fact. And there will be the most extreme gerrymandering that we've seen in a long time as well. So the clock is really running out here. 18 states have already passed 30 new laws to make it harder to vote. Texas could soon be next. Republicans could take back the House simply through gerrymandering 4 southern states: Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas. And so there are not a lot of days to spare here. A lot of these voter suppression laws have already gone into effect. Their new redistricting maps are going to go into effect in a matter of weeks or certainly a matter of months here. And it's just crazy to me that some Democrats would rather protect a relic of Jim Crow than protect voting rights for millions of Americans. I mean, it really doesn't seem like a hard call. And all we're asking is that the same rules apply to both. That if Republicans are making it harder to vote in the states on simple majority votes, then Democrats should be able to make it easier to vote in the federal government through a simple majority. We're asking that all sides play by the same set of rules.
You know, Latasha, it appears the White House's response to that is that folks like yourself are just going to out-organize these laws. Is that true?
You know, the bottom line, that's not our responsibility. If his responsibility, and taking the oath of office is that you are to protect all foreign threats to democracy abroad and domestically. It is the responsibility of the president and the Congress to actually represent the people and make sure that our rights and this democracy is protected. To the extent that we do that for our communities, it's because we love our communities and we believe that we have agency and we literally should be able to have input in any decision about us. But at the end of the day, for us to be in an argument or for us to literally pass a buck, to say that we're responsible for something that we elected you for, is actually not only disingenuous, I think it's dangerous around when we're talking about what is the whole purpose of democracy in the first place. What is the whole purpose of the electoral process, that if fundamentally the position that we put you in, that you're now saying that it's our responsibility to do what we elected you to do.
You know, Bishop Barber, we've seen 9 moderate Democrats say we're not going to pass your infrastructure big bill, the $3.5 trillion, what they're calling human infrastructure bill, unless we get the bipartisan infrastructure bill first. They're playing hardball, and they have the numbers to do it. Would you suggest that the Progressive Caucus, that the Black Caucus, play the same kind of hardball and say, fine, no infrastructure bills of either size until we get voting rights through the Senate?
And right now, yesterday, because that's what it is. Politics is about who gets one win and where. And as Ari said, they have weaponized the filibuster. It's not just a relic of Jim Crow. It's a relic of anti-women's legislation, anti-voting legislation, anti-consumer protection. It is a terrible tool, and we should be saying very clearly, first of all, also, Joy, it's a coward filibuster. At least in the past, they had to stand on the floor and fight, and speak. This is a coward filibuster. They're cowards, right? And so we should be saying, you don't get anything. You don't get your road, you don't get your bridge, you don't get your utility grid unless you pass all of this. We want the infrastructure of our democracy, which is voting. We want the infrastructure of our daily lives, which is living wages. We want all of it and not some of it. And the CBC, the progressives, have the power. We cannot let 1 or 2 senators run this entire democracy into the ditch and have more power than 80-some members. If you combine the CBC and progressive, you're talking a whole lot of members in the House. And so it's time to stand up. It's time to fight back. This is not tiddlywinks. This is about the soul and the future of this democracy. And that's why we got to have pressure in the street. We got to have pressure in the suites. We've got to have pressure everywhere. And again, I'm going to say, anybody who claims to care about these issues and says things like, no, we don't need to deal with the filibuster, no, we don't need mass protests, is a misleader and not a leader.
And, Ari, Kristen Sinema was asked about this on The View, and she said, if you get rid of the filibuster, then when we want to block something bad that the Republicans are doing, we can't do it. Well, how would you answer her?
Well, Kirsten Sinema said, if you get rid of the filibuster, then Republicans will do things like ban mail-in voting. Well, guess what? Republicans are already doing that. Republicans are already using the power they have everywhere to make it harder to vote, using the power they have everywhere to do extreme gerrymandering. Democrats aren't using the power they have to protect voting rights. So it's asymmetric warfare here. You have one side threatening to arrest Democrats because they don't want to make it harder to vote, where the other side is essentially giving Mitch McConnell veto power over protecting American democracy. So all we're saying is, Democrats, use the power you have, not just to help yourself, but to help tens of millions of Americans. It's not about helping Democrats. It's about helping democracy writ large. That's what these bills will do. That's why the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act are so important.
We're about out of time, but Latasha, I'm going to give you the last word. Are the civil rights, all the mainstream and all of the newer civil rights groups, all going to hang together on this?
All of the civil rights organizations that I work with and been connected with, People's Campaign, Black Voters Matter, the National Coalition, many of them, have literally stood in this space for weeks. All summer we've been getting arrested and we've been protesting. Yeah. So yes, we're standing in a space that we see protest as part of our power, and we will stand and continue to protest until we get voting rights.
Amen. Amen. We're with you. LaTosha Brown, Bishop William Barber, Ari Berman, working for the right cause, democracy. That's tonight's Reid Out.